Hello everyone, my name is Maya Temkar and today I will be presenting on clinical data management, or the shortened form is CDM. So CDM is important process in clinical research that helps to ensure the accurateness and the reliability of the data. Here is what we will cover today. So the first point will be what is clinical data management. Next up is key tools which are used in CDM. Third point is what are the different roles which are involved in CDM. Fourth point is different regulations, guidelines and standards which are considered in clinical data management. Fifth point is clinical data management process, or which is also called as CDM life cycle. So the CDM life cycle is again subdivided into three phases. So the first phase is setup, or which is also called as startup phase. Second is conduct phase, and third one is the closeout phase. So we will begin with introduction. So the standard definition of CDM is the process of collecting, cleaning, managing and analyzing the data. So whatever the data is collected during the clinical trial, we have to clean first, then we have to manage them accordingly, and after that we analyze the data so that we can make right decisions about the new medicines and the new treatments. So the CDM process involves or ensures the accuracy. Is it complete or is it compliance with the regulatory standards? So when we test the new drug or a new treatment, then we collect large amount of data. So the data needs to be organized properly. Then we have to check is it reliable or not, are there any errors, or is it stored securely or not. Then we have to analyze the data. So there are different processes which are involved in CDM. So CDM is responsible for the trustworthiness and the regulatory guidelines we have to follow during CDM. In CDM, we perform different activities, like we have to first design the study and set up the study. So for that, we prepare the DMP, which is data management plan. Then next one is data collection. So what are the different tools which are involved for the data collection? Next is data validation and cleaning. Then final data log preparation. Then next is regulatory compliance and documentation. Now move on to the different tools which are used in the CDM process. So the first point is EDC systems. So EDC systems, which is electronic data capture systems, and there are different types of EDC systems. So first is cloud based systems, hybrid based, vendor supported, then open source, custom EDC systems, web based. So these are some types of EDC systems, and some examples are metadata array, which is widely used and mostly used EDC system in all organizations. Viva What EDC, Oracle Clinical, this is also widely used. Redcap, this is cheap one. Clean one. Then Open Clinica, this is open based systems. Trial Master, Data Track, Clean Case, Caster EDC. So these are some examples of tools or the EDC systems we mainly use in CDM. So next point is electronic patient reported outcomes, or the abbreviated form is ePro. So ePro, these are the systems or the applications we use in case of patient-centered clinical trials. So patient-centered clinical trials means the clinical trials in which there is no need to come the patient to the trial site. So the patients can enter the data from their home or the site where they live. So these are used in decentralized clinical trials. So they can add the data in their mobiles or laptops. So these are mainly used in DCT clinical trials. Next is data management softwares. So in data management software, these are used for the validation, cleaning and quality control of the data. So the examples are SAS, which is statistical analysis system. Then next is R, open CDM. The next point is clinical data analysis tools. So these are used for the analysis of the data, and we do the statistical analysis, and the statistical considerations are used for the reporting of the data. The data which is prepared by this statistical analysis team, then it goes to the regulatory authorities, and in statistical analysis they use CDIC standards for the reporting, and the examples are SAS, which is again statistical analysis system, SPSS and R. The next point is database management system. So these system stores and manages all the clinical trial data. Examples are Oracle, SQL Server. The next point is coding tools. So there are different coding tools which are used for the coding of the adverse events. For the adverse events we use MEDRA, which is medical dictionary for regulatory activities, and WHO drug dictionary, which is used for the medications or the coding of the drugs. Let's move on to our next topic, which is what are the different roles involved in clinical data management. So the first one is clinical data manager. So clinical data manager oversees the entire data management processes. He or she ensures the data quality, integrity, and is it compliance with the regulatory standards or not. And also he or she is responsible for the development of data management plan. Then he understands the what are the different requirements of the EDC systems by analyzing the protocol. So he first understand the protocol, and according to that he prepares the DMP. The next one is database programmer. So database programmer develops and maintains the clinical trial databases, which are EDC systems, and also design the CRF, which is case report forms. Then electronic data capture systems are programmed by the database programmer. The next one is clinical data coordinator. So the clinical data coordinator coordinates all the data which is collected during the clinical trial. Then he enters the data in EDC systems, then perform QC checks, which is quality control checks, assist in query management also. So next one is medical coder. So the medical coder responsible for the coding of the adverse events or the drugs. So for coding he or she use MEDRA dictionary or the WHO drug dictionary. And next is clinical research associate. So clinical research associate, he is responsible for the monitoring of the clinical trial site, and he ensures that the data which is collected during the clinical trial is accurate and properly collected. Also he check that the protocol requirements are perform or not, and also check is it compliant with the regulatory standards or not. And next one is investigator. Investigator is the person who is responsible for the all the activities done on the site, and also if there is a query in CDM department, then it is sent to the investigator and investigator resolves the query. Next is clinical research coordinator. So clinical research coordinator coordinates all the activities in the clinical trials. Next is biostatistician. So biostatistician, they are responsible for the statistical analysis of the data. They analyze the data, then prepares the analyzed data for the regulatory submission, and works with the other teams also, and collaborate with the other teams also, and interprets the study results by using different methods. They use statistical methods like ANOVA, regression. So these are some methods they use for the analysis. The next is medical writer. Medical writer, this team is responsible for the preparation of the documents which are involved in the CDM, like DMP, which is data management plan, then SSD, which is standard specification document, ESD, which is edit check specification document, CRF design guidelines. So these are some documents required in CDM are prepared by the medical writer team. Next topic is what are the different regulations, guidelines and standards which are used in CDM. So now let's talk about GCP guidelines. So the GCP stands for Good Clinical Practice, and these are the sets or the rules which helps us to ensure that the data is safe and correct. So for CDM, these are the guidelines, and these are very important because they ensure that the data we handle is reliable and is it secure. So the first thing we need to do is to make sure that all the data is correct and complete, and if we find any mistakes, then we have to fix them and write down exactly so what are the changes, so everything stays clear and accurate. So this is the main important of GCP guidelines. Then we have to keep the data private. So all the confidential and sensitive data. Only the people who are allowed to see it should access the data by using the electronic signatures. And next is we need to regularly check that the data for any problems or is there any errors, and ensures that the data is correct. If we are using electronic system, then we also need to make sure that the data is secure, and all the records of the data for changes are made or not. Next is 21 CFR Part 11. So CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulation. So 21 CFR is totally related to electronic data and the electronic signature. So in CFR there are total 50 different parts, but 21 which is totally related to foods and drugs, and in that subpart 11 is related to clinical data or the electronic data and the electronic signatures. So 21 CFR is these are the guidelines which states that the only authorized users or the authorized persons are, or they can access the data under their e-signatures, which is e-password, and only they can enter the system and access the data. And also audit trail is also part of the 21 CFR, and how we should manage the all electronic data and how we can handle the data. These are the some guidelines involved in 21 CFR. And also 21 CFR is really important in EDC systems. Next is CDIC standards. So CDIC stands for Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium. So as the name suggests, these are the standards for the interchange of the data. CDM team shares all the data to the SAS programmers, and these SAS programmers use CDIC standards. So CDIC is again subdivided into three parts. So the first is SDTM, then second one is ADAM, and third one is TLF. So SDTM stands for Study Data Tabulation Model, and in SDTM we convert all the raw data which is collected by the CDM team into standard format. And in for example, if the data in the CDM team is in the form of DDMM 4 times by 10 dots. So this is the format of the raw data. But in SDTM guidelines, we have to convert that raw data into standard format, which is ISO 8601. So this is standard format for the dates. And also there are some different domains which are involved in CDM. So the implementation guidelines of the CDM is in the format of different domains. So there are different domains like MH, which is medical history, VS, which is vital science, DM, which is demographics. So these are some different domains of the implementation guidelines. The next is ADAM. In ADAM, we prepare the data sets for the analysis. All the analysis of the data is done by the ADAM team, and all the analyzed data is sent to the TLF team. TLF, which is tables, listings and figures. So the tables, listings and figures are then sent to the regulatory authorities for the submission. Next regulation or the guidelines is the Data Protection Regulation, which is HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So HIPAA, this is totally related with the sensitive information of the patient. So this protects the sensitive health information of the subjects from being disclosed, and we can't disclose the information without the consent of the patients. And the confidential or the sensitive data, for example name, address, phone number, so this is sensitive data, and how we can manage all the data and how we can secure the data is given in the HIPAA. Next is Data Protection Laws, which is IT Act 2000, and next is Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Let's move on to our next topic, which is Clinical Data Management Process or CDM life cycle. So the CDM life cycle is again subdivided into three phases. First is setup or startup phase, then second one is conduct phase, and third one is the closeout phase. In setup phase, database is ready or not is checked. In conduct phase, all the data is clean, and in closeout phase we log the data and sent to the next department. This data flow diagram will help us to understand how the data flows from one individual to another individual in the CDM department. So the life cycle starts from the protocol design. Then based on the protocol, we design the DMP, which is data management plan. Then after the DMP design, we prepare the CRF, which is case report form, and the case report forms are of two different types, which is paper CRF and the electronic CRF, and it is prepared by the database data manager. Then after that we design the database, and it is done by the database designer. Then next is data capture. We enter the data, and the entry of the data is done by the data entry associate. Then the data goes for the data validation, and the data validation is done by the medical coder, and they converts or code the adverse event by using different dictionaries. And also we perform the SDV, which is source data verification. Then next is database log. In database log, we log the data and put the restrictions on the editing. So after log, we can't edit anything in the data, and then it is sent to the statistical analysis team. And in statistical analysis team, they perform statistical analysis on the data, perform different regressions, tests, and then it goes to reporting, and after reporting we publish the data. So the first phase from the CDM life cycle, which is setup, or which is also called a startup phase. So in CDM, setup phase involves the planning and preparation of the data, collection of the data, and then we process and analyze the data. So startup phase consists different activities, like first is interpreting protocol. So interpretation of the protocol is done by the clinical data manager. Clinical data manager thoroughly read all the protocol and understand what are the different requirements of the protocol, and according to that we prepare DMP, then we prepare ADC systems, and also we create fields in the CRF. Then next is development of data management plan. So data management plan, it is the document in which we can understand what are the different procedures, what are the different statistical considerations, what different ADC systems we are going to use. So all the process from start to end is given into the data management plan. And after DMP preparation, we prepare the CRF, which is case report form. In case report form, there are two different forms, paper CRF or the electronic CRF. So according to the clinical trial, we prepare CRF and develop the CRF in the EDC systems. Next is database design and development. So the database design is done by the database designer, and according to the protocol the database is prepared, and for that we prepare one document, which is data specification document, before preparing the database. So in this document we can understand what are the different needs of the database, and these needs are included in this document. Next is edit check specification development. So before applying edit checks, we have to prepare one document, which is edit check specification document, and in that document all the information related to edit checks is involved, how we are going to perform, who will perform, on which fields we have to perform the edit checks. So all these things are included in this document. And setup phase is basically divided into 11 steps, in which first step is a review of the protocol by the data manager. Then second step is we have to search for the CRF libraries, and these CRF libraries we take from the CDASH, which is Clinical Data Acquisition Standards Harmonization, in which different standard forms are given, and in those we have to identify the CRF library which is standard for our study. Then third step is after the identification of CRF, we have to perform or prepare the standard specification document, which is SSD, and then after this preparation of SSD, then we have to request the programming team to program the CRF in the EDC system. And after the EDC system preparation, then we have to perform UAT, which is user acceptance testing. And user acceptance testing, which is also called as UAT screen, in which we check that the database is user user friendly or not, or is it reliable, is it compatible. So manually we check the compatibility of the database, and which is mainly done when there is any amendment in the protocol, or uh, for example we intentionally add the wrong values in the fields, but then we check the error is raised or not, so is there any mistakes in the database. So these are check in the UAT screen. The next is sixth step is after resolving all the issues, then it goes to the uh, for the review of the another teams like biostatistics team, then clinical team, medical team reviews all the database, and after that edit check specification document is prepared, and after the edit check documentation we apply the edit checks to the different fields, and again the UAT screen is performed, which is second screening, and after that the third party setup is done and the database is live and ready to use. So in testing of the database, we perform the testing of the database by checking the different modules in the database like CRF forms, different fields are checked, then all the visits are included in the database or not, then we check the dynamics, then what are the different roles involved, then what is derivation. So these are check in the database modules testing. The next one is edit check testing. So edit check is the process in which we identify the discrepancies in the entered data. So in the database we ensure the data validity, and it consists two types, like we can analyze the edit checks manually or the computers checks. So in manual checks, if is there any alphabetical mistakes, or is there any, if it is there in any spelling mistake, so it comes under manual checks. And in computer checks we have to write the code for the these edit checks. So edit checks are of two different types. First is univariate checks and next one is multivariate checks. So in univariate checks it basically includes the range checks. For example, if the field is wet, so to avoid the entry of the extreme values we add the edit check for that particular field. So extreme values we can't add in that field. If we add any extreme values, then it raises the query or it gives the warning. So this is example of univariate edit check. And next is multivariate edit check, which is also called as aggregate edit checks, and in this we cross check the entries through more than one field. Like for example, if the gender of the patient is male, so there should not be any entry for the pregnancy test, or if the subject dies, then no data related to lab test or the visits should be there. So this is example of the multivariate checks, which is done on the more than one field, and in univariate we apply it for the only one field. Then next is medical coding. Medical coding in which we use different dictionaries like METRA, which is medical dictionary for regulatory activities, for the coding of the side effects, and for the coding of the drugs we use WHO drug dictionary. Next is integration. In integration it involves ePro systems, ECOA, lab modules, and safety gateway. So these are some systems involved in integration, which are mainly used in decentralized clinical trials or patient-centric clinical trials, which can be done by the patients from their home. Next is audit trail. So what is audit trail? Audit trail is the procedure in which, or the activity in which all the changes are recorded, who done that, on what time we perform the changes. So all these changes are recorded in the chronological order. So this is audit trail, and it is necessary for the uh, regulatory authorities. Then we can understand what are the different changes that we have made in the system. Then next is user acceptance testing. As I told, user acceptance testing is the technique in which we perform the user friendliness of the database, and we check is there any mistakes in the database or not by the UAT team. And next is validation and documentation. In validation, we perform source data verification, which is cross-checking of the data. Like for example, what if we enter the data in the CRF or the in ADC system, then it is cross-checked with the original documents. This is SDV, which is source data verification, and the sources of the data are like patient diaries, lab data, lab results. So these are some examples of sources by which we enter the data. CRF is also a source which helps us to enter the data into database. Next is eCRF completion guidelines. eCRF completion guidelines is the document which is responsible for the entry of all the specifications that should be included in the CRF are entered in the these guidelines, and according to that we prepare our CRF. Second phase is conduct phase. So conduct phase mainly focus on the accurateness of the data and monitoring of the clinical trial data to support the study outcomes and the regulatory requirements. So in conduct phase, it is divided into two steps. First is data collection and entry. So in data collection and entry, we enter the data by referring to the CRF. So by using CRF, we enter the data into the database, and from paper to electronic, different procedures are used, like double data entry, single data entry. Again, in double data entry, there are two types. Double data entry formed by one person, means one person fills two databases, and second is double data entry, in which two different persons enter the data. In single data entry, there are also different methods, like single entry with second look, single data entry with reading aloud, with source verification. So these are some methods which are used in data entry. The next is data cleaning and validation, in which first is discrepancy management. In discrepancy management, we check the mistakes, or is there any mistakes. Then the data management sends all the queries to the investigator or the CRC. So CRC is responsible for the responding to all the queries raised by the DM team, and all the if the queries are resolved by the CRC or the investigator, then changes are made in the database, and if the query is unresolvable, then it is called as unresolved query. And next is data review. So all the data is reviewed again to check the compatibility and the accurateness of the data. The next one is SAE reconciliation, which is done between the CDMS system, which is EDC systems, or the master drug safety databases, which is related to PV department. So the adverse event data is compared between two systems, and the cross checking of the data of related to adverse event, which is called as SAE reconciliation. The next is external vendor reconciliation. So what are the external vendors? Like for example, labs. If we send our product, or if we send our sample to the labs which is not part of our site, then they are called as external vendor. Then we have to check the parallelness of the data between our data and the data provided by the external vendors, or the results sent by the labs. So this is called as external vendor reconciliation. The next is medical coding used in MEDRA and WHO drug dictionary for the side effects MEDRA, and for the drugs which is WHO. And finally, third phase, which is closeout phase. So in closeout phase, before locking the data, we have to pre-lock. We have to do the pre-lock, in which we have to sign the checklist, and we have to take permissions from all the stakeholders before locking the data. And after lock, we are not able to do any changes, or we are not able to edit the data after the lock. So lock, in final data cleaning, we review all the data and clean all the trial data Then next is database log. In database log, to prevent further changes in the data, there are two types of log. First is soft log and next is final log. In soft log we can unlock it, but in final log we are not able to unlock, which is freeze or we hard, which is also called as hard log. Then next is final data transfer. The data is clean log and transferred to the sponsor or the regulatory authorities. Then final report generation. After that we prepare and submit the final clinical trial report to the statistical analysis team for the statistical analysis of the data. I have only included the main points in the presentation. If you want more detailed information related to CDM, so you can refer these links. Thank you.